Hey, what's going on, friends and family? My name is Skylent, and my favorite genre of MMO is Sandbox MMO. From certain servers on Minecraft, I have not played Eve, that's true, but I very much respect it, and then Black Desert Online, things like that. But for the most part, mostly my favoritism comes from the fantasy of what could be inside of a Sandbox MMO. I generally try every single one, and I often hate it, which is probably your experience with just the MMO genre, period. It's my favorite genre, but I hate every game in it. It's kind of like that for me, sadly, but I'm keeping the hype alive every single time. And here with this top 10, I'm going to be talking about my favoriteest or the best picks for upcoming Sandbox MMOs. There's more than 10 that are upcoming. It's kind of a blossoming genre, you could say, not of success, but of attempts. And these are the 10 that have a chance. So, maybe we'll give them a chance. At least peel some eyeballs for this video for these games. Let's do it once again into the top 10. And starting the list, I love breaking rules at the very start. I'm gonna go with Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. Now, I haven't been able to test this game just yet, but for the most part, from what I understand, is that in a way, this is a game that's being designed almost without the limitations of defining it as a sandbox or a theme park MMO. Back in the day, kind of, like vanilla World of Warcraft was kind of the end of that era, but you had old school RuneScape, or classic RuneScape especially, you had EverQuest and a number of MMOs that now you might be able to call them both terms or maybe sandbox more often, but they were more sandboxy in nature. They were more free-flowing. They weren't as constricting or linear, and Pantheon Rise of the Fallen is following suit with that sort of design philosophy. So whether or not you consider it sandbox, I think we should all applaud it and look forward to it for its sandboxy or much more sandboxy nature inside of this genre that has become so very defined. A couple of things I'm worried about is the slow-paced nature of the combat. It seems like it's taking more inspiration than just design philosophy, macro stylings. It looks also microscopically very influenced. And the graphics, I don't know, they're a little bit better than its competitors, which are also following way too closely, directly in the shadow and steps of its predecessors. But this is the one out of the classical, retro-inspired MMOs that I think will actually spearhead the genre moving forward. Number 9, I have Star Citizen, a little bit low on the list, but that's just because it's taking a while for it to kind of have all of its different modules really be put together to be a proper full, cohesive gameplay loop. But Star Citizen, I think, is actually shaping up well. It's a lot of money going forward to making something, and there is something in stuffs being made. I'm just, waiting for it to really be something fully playable. That's all. In terms of actually having a full community come together and play it, and it's fully gameable actually and winnable, stuff like that. But Star Citizen, it does seem to have certain aspects to it that are getting some meat on the bones and that is playable, and its community is growing. And I think it's a game that eventually it will come out. A lot of these Kickstarter games won't, or they won't be anything like how they should have been. But Star Citizen, I do think, will deliver. It might be just over-delivering over many years. Will it be playable next year? I don't know, but it'll be something. So I think it's always worth mentioning in lists like this because it is the absolute most ambitious one that also is following through with what it's trying to do. Next, I want to talk about Last Oasis, which, by the way, link in the description as well as a comment. I moderate the subreddit for Last Oasis. I don't know, some conversation happening there. Last Oasis seems to have not much attention being drawn to it, so a little bit lower on the list as well. But then again, this list is just thrown together. It's just upcoming games. I mean, who am I to really judge? But for the most part, yeah, Last Oasis is it's kind of interesting in terms of like when I first saw it, I was wowed. Just the first concept of grappling hooks and these walking bases, these walking air machines, which I've learned is actually inspired by something called strand beasts. Maybe we'll do a video on that because it's just such a neat concept. But this is kind of wind or wood punk I don't know, it's a very strange aesthetic, but it's like kind of like a nomadic sort of survival MMO. I say sort of survival because it's really not that much of an MMORPG to any extent. Not like you might think like endgame raids or like Black Desert Online. It's much more inspired by survival games that are just really more persistent online, larger teams, guild fights, stuff like that, with walking bases. Neat. Okay, moving forward, Fractured. Fractured is a game that I don't know too much about. It's been very, very quiet, but I moved it up on the list. I didn't want to start it off because I have high hopes for it. I've really enjoyed games like Albion Online, even though that sits at mixed reviews. I have a lot of hope for Core Punk and a few other titles coming out. These isometric sandbox MMOs, they just seem really real to me. I don't think they're overreaching. I don't think it's too much to ask for, but then again, a lot of them have been mixed reviews or even failing, from like Legends of Aria to, you know, Albion Online, etc. There's a number of them. They're trying, they're coming out, but hey, at least they are releasing. They are coming out. Fractured has a couple of cool gimmicks, such as having like such a huge plethora of skills to be able to be utilized that you can mix and match at any time. Apparently, it's very easy to change archetypes with your class and your abilities, and I really appreciate that. That makes the character building more sandbox, where often in these sandbox MMOs, you don't have that sort of RPG style customization. You kind of do an Albion, but there's still very strict restrictions on that. So I kind of like Fractured having such pluralific RPG mechanics with its paper doll and stuff like that. So more sandbox MMOs need to do it. I would appreciate it, or just really MMOs period. But yeah, Fractured, just for that gimmick, I want to see where it goes. I want to mention it because not too many people are talking about it. Next up, we've got Ashes of Creation, also pretty lower on the list. Like normally on a list like this, if this was like 3 years ago, especially like whenever the game was first announced, I think it would be number one. Like you would have to put it as number one on the list because it's pure ambition, and that first Kickstarter video was so heartfelt, seemingly. But in the end, well, I'm saying in the end, but the game isn't out yet. But I feel like we're at a point where we can all kind of admit what Ashes of Creation is. The thing is, though, is it did have a lot of money thrown at it. It's got a lot of money behind it. Is it too big to fail? Something should happen from this game, and it probably could be a cool game. And considering that the genre, especially the more hardcore PvP-centric versions of sandbox MMOs, such as Darkfall and Mortal, which, by the way, Mortal Online 2 was announced, that's not getting on the list. Those games failed. And Ashes of Creation, if it just launches, will probably be better than those games. But I want to say Ashes of Creation is a scam. But at the same time, even if it was a scam, it could still turn out to be all right. There's some decent ideas, some decent concepts, and even a thrown together game, it's the community that really makes it. And we could make Ashes of Creation. We could take from the ashes of Creation and make and create something cool and good from it, but maybe not. So yeah, a little bit lower on the list. All right, but halfway on my list here, upcoming sandbox MMO, I'm going to put a game that is a little less sandbox than it was originally envisioned, and that's going to be a game called New World. I was actually flown out twice to Irvine, California to Amazon Studios. I got 2 of them hoodies. Met a lot of awesome YouTubers from Nerd Slayer to Lazy Peon, etc. Had a really great time. But the game is under NDA, or at least my experience was, so I can't say too much or how it's changed and evolved. But what I can tell you is that it's very apparent that the game is going into a slightly different direction. It's not really the survival game that it was, but it's now going to be a more fantasy, more PvE seemingly focused game, even to the point where you can play the game without being like flagging for PvP, which is a double-edged sword for sandbox MMOs. But I will say this, don't think of it as a hardcore PvP sandbox MMO that became more Care Bear. Instead, think of it as what would have been a toxic survival MMO experience that is now more approachable and more healthy, probably I think, of an ecosystem for those new players and for them to engage in the full universe of this world that is New World. But I totally get the drama and controversy with that, but I'm just gonna say this as somebody who loves cat and mouse gameplay, sandbox PvP MMO, this is something that I am very enthusiastic for seeing these changes. Without going into details, I think that this is the appropriate direction for New World. Okay, so moving through, we've got Population Zero, a game that probably is off on the horizon, distant ways, but I think that maybe we get some playable state next year. That'd be pretty neat. Population Zero looks to be a survival MMO, and very different to pretty much anything else on the list. I think that this one is going for a true focus on survival mechanics, where this normally would not work in a game with medieval-style combat, a game that would normally be very trudging and awkward and really chorish, which MMOs can be anyways, even when they're theme park and totally fantasy. I feel like sci-fi is a really great environment because you have guns, you have technology, you have a lot of instances where you can just kind of make the gameplay rapid, instantaneous, and less chorish, because science, fantasy, gameplay mechanics, you can kind of throw it all together and just kind of explain things away. And you could just have teleporters and things. You can have instant spawners or factory style items. It's you don't have to just literally punch trees to survive. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, Population Zero seems to be a pretty fantastic sci-fi game that I think is going to mainly truly focus on survival style mechanics. I just really hope they have the PvE be truly engaging, which seems to be the case. A lot of people really enjoyed that about Ark Survival Evolve, and even some games that have mixed reviews, such as Dark and Light, as well as Citadel. A lot of people just like fighting dragons and fighting big monsters, even if they do enjoy PvP in these style of games. Population Zero, I think if you have good, fun monsters to fight, and then, they actually are monstrous, then from there, with the base building and everything, a community will, enrapture itself around, that core gameplay loop, and then the PvP will flourish, which is, something New World is also trying to kind of do, but of course being much more Care Bear. But with the sci-fi element, I think Population Zero can get away with being a proper survival sandbox MMO. Okay, number 3, I have Crowfall, which I'm starting to wonder if it really should be so high. Normally, I like to have brand new games up very high on the list because those games have yet to really make me doubt myself or doubt the future of the game. Crowfall, man, I want to say so many different things. I'll just stumble across my words. So I'll just quickly explain Crowfall. Basically, guys, it's got this voxel style destruction kind of gameplay element, lots of different kits you can use with different classes. You jump in, it's kind of usual archetypal stuff, but the gameplay mechanics are a little bit more action based. I think it kind of reminds me of Smite, the MOBA, over the shoulder, pseudo actiony tab kind of thing. Not too dissimilar to it, maybe a little bit more of an action packed kind of version of WoW with some skill shots added in, surely. But the thing is, it is going to be less action packed than it was originally envisioned, less sandbox, less creative, less voxel destruction, blah blah blah. Basically anything I could really promote and say about the game, it's like, I don't know, we're just kind of, it's detracting overall with time. But anyways, there is going to be an island thing, an instanced guild-based kingdom style thing where you could build kingdoms and have like a trading post, stuff like that. Neato Rito. Then there's going to be these individual instance campaigns. So this is going to be an instanced sandbox MMOs where there's sort of like these instanced little mini sandbox worlds you kind of jump into. They have their own sort of universe rules and things like that, and you kind of campaign, try to win the campaign in a sense. And one might be free for all, one might be like kind of a guild versus guild, one might limit the classes or the races that can jump into it, blah blah blah. And then eventually through all the different campaigns, apparently one guild can claim the throne. Neat. But then out of all of that, what is really going to come to fruition? It seems like a lot of attention has completely fallen from Crowfall, and every single trailer really has been more and more disappointing. So, the hype is alive? For how long? Okay, now, a lot more optimism now, okay? And that's a game called Starbase. I don't really know much about this. All I know is when I saw the trailer, and also I had to share it with friends, we all were kind of freaking out because it just looks really awesome. Namely, just a couple of reasons here. Starbase has this concept of creation. You're really like piecing together piece by piece, or salvaging and repairing all your ships, your bases, your whatever you can make, your stations, in space. as well as the destruction, where you have these microscopic voxels. Like you have a shotgun, you can blast through a door and it creates this hole, and then you can throw a grenade through it or whatever. You can crawl through these little holes that you make. You can literally rip apart it's not these giant blocks like you have in Minecraft or a number of other games. Dude, no, it's kind of a voxel destruction that I personally have not seen. Maybe debatable, you could say a little bit in games like Rainbow Six Siege for very specific encounters with certain materials. But this game, it's like the whole game can just kind of be blown apart. You can clearly see from the gameplay what I'm talking about. And I love that this isn't a cinematic, it's gameplay. It looks so massive, epic. The full 3D space, sort of, FPS fighting. I think I would really appreciate this game, but a lack of PvE, I don't know what's going on with the economy. I don't think it's going to have really the staying power of something like Star Citizen, or maybe Dual Universe, which is going to be maybe more economic based. We'll see what's going on there, but in terms of PvP, I feel like Starbase could be peerless. This is something that just hasn't been done properly ever, and you might get a little bit of that in Star Citizen, but with the voxel destruction and being able to build your own machines and stuff like that, oh man, Starbase could just be wild. But friends, we got some honorable mentions here. I'm gonna start out with Hightail. Hightail isn't properly on the list, which I really could have put it on the list, but Hightail seems to be more focused on being kind of an action RPG of sorts that's cooperative in terms of its vanilla state. But undoubtedly, it is a sandbox game, but then it's really focused on having all these micro servers. So you might have a server that somebody builds that is a actual sandbox MMO server, and then somebody might have a hardcore PvP sandbox server, some people might have just a creative server, etc. But those are all sort of individualized, compartmentalized versions of the game. People really don't like when you just call Minecraft a sandbox MMO. You need to be like, oh, sorry, I meant Winecraft, the specific Minecraft server, so etc. That's why I'm making it an honorable mention, but it needs to be mentioned. Next up, I've got Camelot Unchained, which I don't know if you can really consider a sandbox MMO. If games like PlanetSide are sandbox, if just making it full, true open world is sandbox, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. So I'm going to say it's an honorable mention. I'm also a little bit weary because a lot of attention has completely evaded this game, but its history is very rich, and where it's coming from, what it's done for the entire genre, inspiring games like PlanetSide or the PvP inside of Elder Scrolls and Guild Wars. I think Camelot Unchained can come back, but I just people aren't talking about it, and there's not much footage or video, and I don't think it really looks too appealing. I'm a little worried, and hopefully you guys can forgive me for being so, because it could be so great. And finally, Dual Universe, which is what I mentioned earlier, actually talking about Starbase. So between Star Citizen, Starbase, and Dual Universe, they all have their own unique things that they're doing. Star Citizen's kind of doing all the things. Starbase has its first-person shooter combat. But Dual Universe has, this really cool gimmick where players can build their own ships, obviously, like some other games that I mentioned, but you can sell the blueprints. And I think having a game where you literally can be good at crafting, there's a skill to the crafting, not just a mind-numbing grind to it. That's such a cool aspect. Of course, it's going to focus, on the kind of dogfighting style gameplay that Star Citizen's going to have, moving between different worlds, things like that. It really does seem like a more proper competitor to Star Citizen, but I think it's a little bit more down to earth at the same time. Whether that's what we want in a spacefaring game, I don't know. So honorable mention. I just think between Star Citizen and Starbase, those two games are different enough to really make the list proper. Well, Dual Universe, I don't know. It's somewhere in between. Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit careless actually explaining this game because we don't know too much about too many things, but overall I'm just going to say this game looks extremely solid. The foundation is there. I'm pretty sure this game's going to shoot straight, but yes, Core Punk is going to be a very cartoon, ARPG-inspired space western open world sandbox MMO RPG with kind of a focus on hardcore gameplay, like slower paced, a little bit more tactical gameplay, a lot of dying, most likely, especially if you're alone in the open world. either through ganking or the kind of engaging PvE. Looks like there's a lot of skill shots or things that you need to avoid and be aware of, your cooldowns, things like that, especially with the collaborative style, very structured character kit designs. I'm definitely peeling some eyeballs, trying to analyze the trailer more and more, and if you haven't seen my breakdown video, you definitely should go check that out. But basically, I feel like that video elucidated so many fears when it came to problems that proliferate this kind of failing, waning, but still ballooning genre. I don't know, just a lot of games coming out, or, you know, saying they'll come out and then they don't, and they change or they break or whatever, but Core Punk just seems like it's gonna work. The polish is already hammered on. You can definitely tell the trailer was very self-aware in meta, and I'm definitely looking forward to a true hardcore experience that really needs collaborative style gameplay when it comes to both PvE, which so far looks a little bit more thoughtful than Albion Online, and the PvEVP, and then also the strict PvP, which we don't know too much about. Every game does have its focus and its specialties, but Core Punk, what I can say so far is that while it might not be shooting for the stars like some games, literally like Star Citizen, and while it might not have a singular focus in any one direction when it comes to hardcore PvP, or is it the PvE, or whatever, what have you, it just seems like this is going to be really the kind of, you know, for a true hardcore game that's meant for adults. This is not going to be a rated E for everyone game. This seems to be the most approachable out of the genre, which is so much filled with toxicity and utter failure. And I just, you know what? I'm just looking forward to actually being able to play a game like that for once in my life, that actually has a population, that has people enjoying it and joining it. And for a genre that's all about really finding your own place and making and carving your own life inside of this world, it's cool to finally have a game where it will actually have life. Anyways, friends and family, that's going to be it for my top 10 upcoming Sandbox MMO with a little bit of honorable mentions. I did name drop a few games. I just kind of assume that you know of the genre, but it's entirely possible that you don't, because again, a very maybe debatably the most unapproachable genre on the planet. It just takes so much money and time investment to even begin to think about doing anything on here. But if you do need somebody to talk to, you can actually join my Discord, which I'll leave in the description as well as the comments. And you don't be afraid to ask me any questions in the comments or in the Discord. I'm here to try to help, and I'm sure we'll find somebody else, because there's definitely some specialness to these style games and others that are similar. So anyways, guys, all I ask is that you try to have fun. Much love. My name's Skylent, and I'll see you in the next one.